Hey, it's Matt, your average gamer, and for this video, we're going to be showing you how to break your build, how to basically learn about buffs, how to use buffs, and how to get extreme damage out of any build that you use in Elden Ring. This is going to be a really fun one. Seen people lately post stuff, talk about stuff, they'll say this build is broken or that build's broken. Well, guess what? You're going to be able to break whatever build you're using with this buffing system. I'm going to show you my preferred one, and then I'm going to go over all the different buffs and crazy things you can do to maximize your damage. Show a highlight reel of all different buffs essentially that you're going to see on screen here, buffing entirely different weapons, spells, incantations, and then we're going to go over everything in detail. I made up slides to explain everything, how buffs work, aura buffs, body buffs, and everything you need to know. This is going to be a really descriptive video in terms of buffs, and again, I have a preferred buffing system that does all generic damage and you can apply to almost any build. You'll be able to use this for the majority of builds in the game, and once you memorize it, it's very easy to memorize. You're going to be doubling, tripling your damage, and whatever you're using is going to crush bosses. Before we go on with this crazy video, we're just shy of 10,000 subs. We're going to do a video soon to celebrate that as well. Probably something like my 10 favorite builds or the 10 best builds we've ever done on the channel. And I want to state real quick, if you're not on the Discord, it's the time to join that. There's over 400 people in there. And if you're not subbed, now is the time to sub. We're going to be doing constant, awesome Elden Ring content and keeping you busy all summer. Things you can do with buffs are absolutely insane. As you can probably tell from the energy that I have in this video that this is something I enjoy doing. I like buffing stuff. I like being able to one-hit or one-shot stuff. And I like being able to do insane levels of damage with basically anything in the game. And as I stated before, I have a preferred buffing system that works really well for this. It's something that I use for a ton of different Ashes of Wars, spells, and incantations in Elden Ring to simply just do massive damage and make the game a lot easier. We're going to go into detail with that. As I said, I made a whole bunch of slides, and we're going to cover all the different buff types as well. Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike is one that you're going to have an absolute blast with as far as being able to buff this, but obviously you can buff the Giant's Crusher, you can buff the Great Sword, the regular Guts Great Sword, you can buff pretty much anything in the game. Death's Poker, as you saw there in the video and the clips here, whatever you're going to buff, it's going to do a lot of damage in the end with this buffing system and with understanding how aura and body buffs work. And in the end, most importantly, above anything else, you're going to have a lot of fun in Elden Ring when you start to do stuff like this because it keeps it interesting. It makes it interesting. If you're somebody who just wants to take a little bit of vengeance on some of the bosses in the game, being able to double or triple your damage makes use of just awesome builds and turns them into even more powerful builds that, again, can just crush bosses, make the game a lot easier, and leads to some funny clips like this one here. Speaking of which, at the end of this video, I am going to be also announcing the next challenge on Discord. We've been doing weekly challenges on Discord for basically shout-outs, and you get to be basically leader of the Discord for a week too, so that's pretty fun. I'm going to announce that at the end of this video. Obviously, it's going to be related to buffs and whatnot, so we're going to talk about that at the end. You definitely want to hang around for that. And again, if you're not on the Discord, be sure to join that as well. And before we get into these slides here, let's show off one more clip, and then we're going to talk about everything in great detail. There are several different types of buffs in the game, but I want to cover aura and body buffs because they're going to be really important to what we can use and what we can stack together to maximize our damage. We're going to get into detail here. As I mentioned, I made some slides, and let's get into the details. For the best aura buffs in the game, in my opinion, you have the Commander Standard, which is 20% more damage but has added weight and is less time. And then you have Golden Vow, which is 15% more damage. However, it lasts 80 seconds, I believe. It's longer and no additional weight. And now on to body buffs. For body buffs, we have three of note. We have Flame Grant Me Strength, which will give you 20% more physical and fire damage, so it's great for physical fire damage builds. I know that's straightforward, but that's the truth. Blood Boil, which is hard to farm for if you're on console, but you get plus 30% physical damage. And Howl of Shabriri, which is my favorite one, for 40 seconds you get plus 25% generic damage. Best generic talismans for doing massive damage in terms of the fact that you can turn them into any types of damage because they're 20% boost are Lord of Blood's Exultation, which you can proc with Seppuku, 20% for 20 seconds. Kindred's Exultation, which you can proc with Fetid Pots, 20% for 20 seconds. You can only use one of these two, but if you're staying at full HP, you can use the Ritual Swords Talisman for 10% extra generic damage. You can use Blessing's Boon if you use Fetid Pots to get your HP back to full after you cure it with boluses, and then the Red Feathered Branchsword, which is 20% additional damage when you're under 20% HP. I'm going to show a couple clips here that go over more basic buffs without the low health proccing, because you can mix up a whole bunch of different things. And as I stated earlier, though, I am going to go over my preferred buffing system later. But for this, you can use something like Flame Grant Me Strength, Golden Vow, and then you can even Poison Proc it. And use Blessing's Boon to get back to full HP to make sure you have the Ritual Swords Talisman. By the way, Blessing's Boon in general goes fantastically with Ritual Swords Talisman because it tapers you off. If you get chipped a little bit or you're damaged or you're just healing and you're near that area as far as full HP, you'll be able to get right back there if you're using something that heals you consistently like Blessing's Boon. You can see here with Burno Flame, by the way, it's a great spell or incantation rather that you can use on Melania, and you can absolutely destroy her with this. With buffs, it makes it even easier, but it will consistently knock her on the ground, and she has 0 fire resistance. It absolutely destroys her as far as her HP goes. It will just knock her down consistently doing damage. I've fought her several times with Burno Flame solo, and it is not that challenging. You do have to get a little bit used to the waterfowl, making sure that she doesn't go up in the air on you, but as long as you can do enough damage, you can avoid it, and you can make that fight very quick. Let's get into the buffs here, which for the bubble build, I just threw on Howl of Shabriri and Golden Vow for an extra 40%. You're going to see what it does to Placidusax. That would be using 1 body buff and 1 aura buff. The aura buff that we used was Golden Vow. The body buff that we used was Howl of Shabriri. We added 40% generic damage to our build, and we're able to absolutely crush Placidusax with the bubbles, given the fact that we increased our damage even more. As you can see, it did add up to substantial damage. So sometimes just doing a couple of basic buffs, taking advantage, making sure that you have 1 aura buff, that you have 1 body buff, is going to give you enough damage to make a lot of the fights easier in Elden Ring. This was on New Game +7, and he vanished quite quickly with the Envoy's Longhorn, which is awesome for large targets, but with the additional buffs, it shredded him even more. Marius Executioner is another fun one to buff, and as you can see here, I mixed it up again while also doing the more full HP version and going for Howl of Shabriri and then even Poison Procking at the end, because that will stack with that in Golden Vow. It all stacks together to add up for substantial damage, and we're able to do a fairly good amount of damage to the Tree Sentinels here with the buffs that we used. That's the important thing here. If you want to break any build in Elden Ring, meaning you want to take your build and you want to maximize damage, as long as you're boosting things with generic damage boost, you're going to be consistently doing more damage with whatever build you want to use. So whatever build you have, you're going to be able to break it with the system that I use, the buffing system I like. It's going to add up to substantial levels of damage, and you're going to be able to break whatever build you want to break in Elden Ring. Let's go over the slides, everything in detail here. We're going to go over the buffing system and everything that you need to know. For me, before I do anything else, I want to have these 2 talismans. Now, you can replace Kindred of Rot's Exultation with Seppuku, but I have an easier time with the Fetid Pots for some reason. So we're going to go with the red Feathered Branchsword. You're going to need that, and then you're going to need the Kindred of Rot's Exultation too. Then you're going to drink your tear, which will give you additional damage depending on what you have in it. And then you're going to bring your HP down with Seppuku until you have just enough HP to survive 1 proc of Madness. Then you can proc the Black Dumpling for an extra 10% additional damage for a minute, generic damage again. And then at that point, you're going to add 20% because you're now at that under 20% HP threshold. You're going to use Golden Vow, which is an additional 15%, again, generic damage for everything for 80 seconds. Then you're going to use Howl of Shabriri one more time to get that 25% generic damage boost for 40 seconds. And if you're casting, you can use the Jellyfish Shield or Terra Magica at this point. And lastly, use the Fetid Pots and then the boluses to cure the poison, and it adds up to massive damage. We're going to be bringing our HP down here, as you can see on screen. I'm going to show everything that was in that slide in live action, and at that point, we're going to be proccing the Black Dumpling for the Madness, which is going to give us an extra 10%, 30% in total once we're under 20% HP. And this wasn't in the slide because it's whether or not you have it, but if you have it at this point, you're going to switch to the Mushroom Crown because that's going to give you an extra 10%. I think I did forget that as far as the slide goes, and then I obviously didn't have enough Fetid Pots, but we're going to move on without that. After we switch to the Mushroom Crown, then we're going to use Golden Vow and Howl of Shabriri. And at this point, as I mentioned, you have the option of using Terra Magica or the Jellyfish Shield if you're casting, and if you're not casting, go right into the Fetid Pots, boluses, and then you're going to attack whatever you're facing, and you're going to be able to do massive damage. Add up to literally 2-3 times the base damage. I'm not good at math at all, but it adds up to a lot. Everything stacks like multiplicatively, so you're just going to continue to add stacks essentially of damage, and you're going to do a lot. I hope that was really helpful as far as buffs goes. The buffing system I like to use that's fairly straightforward and was easy to memorize, and it takes advantage of pretty much one of each type of everything. Challenge on Discord for this week is to take this buffing system or your own one and to buff up any Ash of War spell or incantation for massive damage. If you're not on the Discord, be sure to join it. If you're not subbed and you love overpowered PvE builds, be sure to check out all the awesome builds that are on my channel. Thanks for watching. As always, I will catch you guys there.